All right, let's dive right in. We recite these verses every single day, multiple times a day. I mean, they're the bedrock of our prayers. But have we ever really stopped to ask, what are they truly asking of us? What's the real scope of this conversation we're having with our Creator?
And that's really the core question we're going to tackle. Is Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening, just meant for our personal solace, a quiet comfort for the individual heart? Or does it outline something way, way bigger, a kind of blueprint for society itself, a collective contract with God?
For many of us, the way we learn to understand this chapter is as this deeply personal thing. It's a one-on-one conversation between me and Allah. And that connection is, of course, absolutely crucial.
This classical, individual reading, it's probably very familiar to all of us. The focus is all on my direct line to Allah, my personal piety. The thinking goes, my relationship with God is a private affair, my own little sanctuary. So my faith tells me how to act inside the mosque, but when I step outside, well, other systems take over. Political, economic, you name it.
But that creates a pretty tough question, one that modern revivalist thinkers have really pushed us to ask. Does God's authority just stop at the mosque door, or are we really meant to live this kind of split life?
So here's where it gets really interesting. When we look super closely at the language of the surah itself, using what scholars call semantic analysis, which is just a fancy way of saying we're understanding words based on how they're used across the whole Quran, a totally different picture starts to emerge. The language isn't singular, it's plural. I mean, think about that for a second. It doesn't say, you alone I worship. It says, you alone we worship. Not guide me, but guide us. Every single time, it's a collective we, not a solitary I. The prayer is being said in a group voice. And that little shift from I to we is profound. It's huge. Revivalist scholars argue that this points to a scope that's way beyond just the individual. The message is transcendent. It's not locked into one time or place. It's speaking to us as members of a society, a community, and ultimately a civilization throughout all of human history.
Okay, so let's actually put these two powerful ways of reading it side by side. Because when you see them next to each other, the difference really, really hits you. The contrast is just stark.
This really lays it all out. The individual view, it kind of privatizes God, right? He's my sustainer, my judge, my personal source of mercy. But the collective view sees him as the ultimate public authority, the governor of all existence, right here, right now. And that changes everything. Suddenly, worship isn't just a private ritual. It's a public pledge to become the hands and feet of his mercy and justice out there in the world.
Just take the phrase Rabb al-Alamin, sustainer of all worlds. The collective reading forces us to ask a simple question. If his authority sustains all worlds, how can we possibly say it doesn't include the social, the political, and the economic worlds that we build? According to this reading, of course it does. His authority is absolute.
And it's the exact same logic when we call him Malik, the ultimate owner and authority. This isn't just about some far-off judgment day. If he is the true authority right now, then our job totally changes. We're not just sitting around waiting for a verdict. We're supposed to be the instruments of his justice on earth today.
And hey, this isn't some new, modern reinterpretation. The very first community of believers, the Prophet and his companions, they lived this. They didn't just keep to themselves and focus on their own private piety. No way. They saw their faith as a direct command to go out and actively shape the world, to engage in a collective struggle to build a just and moral society.
So you can see where this is all going, right? This isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. This reading leads directly to a call to action. An individual reading leads to one kind of life, while a collective one leads to something very, very different.
So, what does this collective reading actually demand from us? Well, it's not passive, that's for sure. It demands total submission to Allah's authority in every single part of our lives. It demands that we actively participate in a collective struggle for justice. And it demands that we follow the model of the Prophet and his companions, who were, at their core, society builders, not hermits.
So what's the big deal? What are the risks if we just ignore that collective call and stick only to the individual reading? Well, this interpretation warns that it leads to abandoning our social responsibility. It means living a life of internal conflict. And, most dangerously, it means risking the exact same mistakes made by past communities, the very ones the surah tells us to avoid.
And this leads to a really challenging thought. By taking the struggle, the collective responsibility out of our faith, we risk flipping the whole relationship on its head. We call Allah our master, but do our actions reduce him to a servant? Someone we just call on to fulfill our personal needs and wants?
And this is where that warning at the end of the surah becomes so incredibly powerful. We ask Allah to save us from the path of those who earned His anger and those who went astray. The collective reading argues that choosing to be passive, choosing not to engage in the struggle for justice, that is the very error these verses are warning us against.
All of this brings us to the final, powerful takeaway. What is the path we're meant to choose every single time we recite these words?
When you really analyze the language of the surah, it becomes crystal clear. The core message is not just a private feel-good spirituality. It's a normative demand. It's telling us how we ought to live. It's a collective demand, speaking to a whole community. And it's a civilizational demand with huge implications for how we build our societies. The surah isn't an escape from the world's problems. It's a mandate to go out and confront them.
And so that's the question this reading leaves us with. When we ask to be guided to the straight path, are we just asking for a path to walk all by ourselves? Or are we actually committing to a path that we are supposed to build together?